We are the last generation of linguists. We are a dying breed, but we are also going to be more needed than ever. The name of the game is risk. If you know how to translate better than most people, way better than AI, in an area where there's risk, you're going to be in business and you're going to be more and more valuable as time goes on.
I have really been looking forward to this episode. I'm joined by a very wonderful friend and colleague of mine, Mat Gautier. I feel like you're one of the few voices right now who is not just reacting to AI, but actually trying to restructure the industry around it. Although that's common in the Silicon Valley, it is really rare in our industry. So you built and scaled a very successful agency in Canada called Elite Communications. You left the industry and then came back. What made you leave? And what pulled you back in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bridget, for that wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here and to have this chance to speak with you. So basically, my two parents are lawyers, French and English, and my dad asked me to translate when I was at university. And when I
That's common.
graduated in politics, I decided I have no career in front of me with
Yeah.
this degree, and I just decided maybe I could become a freelancer. And so I thought I'd be doing it for a couple months, and it turned into a career. I turned my freelance business into an agency, grew it over a space of about 20 years into a 30-person agency based in Montreal, Quebec. And after 20 years, I thought, I think I've done what I had to do in translation, and I was also expecting a son. And so I decided maybe now's the time to turn the page on this chapter. And I thought I'd get into maybe climate change or something that I felt really called towards. And the entire year that I stepped away from the industry, all I could think about was AI, basically. What can we linguists do to thrive in this new era?
Yeah.
And because I was the only person in localization who wasn't actually working, I had time to think and take long walks with my son. And I thought, like, I have something here, like I want to get out. So I started to write these articles, and eventually my company was being managed by a general manager, and she took a step back. So I basically I was called to step back in, which I wasn't necessarily too enthusiastic about at the beginning. But now I'm really excited to have like my hands back into, because what I'm doing now is basically implementing, boots on the ground, implementing the vision that I laid out in writing over the past year.
Wow. And that's an entirely different focus than when you left, right? Because that's what everyone is facing. And interestingly, though, that you actually physically stepped away and then stepped back, that must have maybe been helpful to this process of rebuilding, do you feel?
Yeah, so I did a lot of training and a lot of leadership training. I'm into Tony Robbins' teachings. I
Oh,
don't know if
yes,
you're
yes,
familiar
yes,
with
I
them.
know. I do know.
I did a whole bunch of seminars. So I'm back like a new person, I feel like a new leader. I feel also I have more clarity on what can a linguists or LSPs do to thrive in the era of AI. So I have a clear vision, and now I'm back in the messy part.
Yeah.
The messy part is the execution,
Oh,
like the
yeah.
hard, slow, non-linear part. But I'm excited to be doing it.
I actually was reading something you wrote, and one thing that kind of is interesting to me, I'd like you to elaborate on it, is you actually said that the translation industry you don't feel was just disrupted by all the technology and all the advances in technology, but that it was intrinsically already structurally broken to some degree. And could you talk about that? Because I think it's very important to understand that to where we're going to be going with this.
Yeah, I'd love to. That's something that's, to me, is fascinating to study the economics of a market, the maturity of a market. So to me, translation is a highly fragmented, low trust industry. And by highly fragmented, what I mean is there's a long tail, there's a whole bunch of very small players, and there are a few larger players. Most of the translation happens with small, like micro or very small companies. So either the freelancer themselves or a small company. Most of the translation is done in these small business settings. And by low trust, what I mean is that in certain industries, for example, in retail, there are brands that you can trust. There are household names. You go to Costco, you know you're going to get a good deal at Costco. Nobody asks themselves the question. You don't look at the prices. You know you're getting a good deal because Costco has engineered that trust. They've constrained themselves in all sorts of ways. Everything they do was meant to optimize your trust in you getting a great deal at Costco. And that's why you go to Costco. So you have high trust in household names. You have at the moment, I'm pretty sure, a good part of your income, money, or wealth in a bank. And you might not know anyone personally at that bank. And the reason you're not nervous about where your money is at the moment is because you have complete trust in the institution. And in translation, we don't have that. We don't have trust in institutions. We don't have trust in certifications. We don't have trust. There are no household names. Even the larger companies are mainly unknown from the general public. And the consequences of that is that the market is a bit like a Far West. So it's very relational. So it's who you know, a little bit like the hairdressing market. So there are no or very few hairdressing salon brands. It's mostly just the person.
Sure.
You have a hairdresser that you trust, and you always go to that person. And you don't go outside of that relationship because it's dangerous, because you don't trust the other person.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's either catastrophe or there's some financial problem that could occur. Absolutely. I wanted to just also just quickly interrupt here because was reading one of your, I think it was your bio, and I remember constantly talking to clients about this over the last couple decades, that translation is something that you have to trust. It's a selling point when we're trying to market our services, when we're trying to tell people we're all certified, or this is why you can trust us. And it's interesting when you point this out to clients that you have to realize that we understand that when you receive what we give you, you're just basically running with it. And
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've seen clients look at something in a language they absolutely don't speak, even a script or a text they don't speak, could be Cyrillic, and they're like, oh, this looks good, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's just so funny that when you bring this to a client's attention, they're like, oh, wow, okay, you're right, I can't check this. And the term you used, I had never heard before, that you used it as you said it was a low credence based market, low credence item, which I didn't realize was an economic financial term, but that's something I feel is useful for us as professionals to describe it that way. If you said an IT firm or other things.
Yeah, so the translation market's a low trust environment, in my opinion, and translation as a service is a credence good. So a
Credence based.
credence good is a category of goods. It's an economics term, and it basically means something that as a buyer you don't really know what you're getting. You have to have some kind of faith in the person that's selling it to you. So
Right.
that's us as the language providers, language service providers. We are providing a credence good, just like when you go to the pharmacist. Even if you get your medication, you don't know if
Right.
pharmacist was doing a good job. You don't know how long it took them to organize everything.
Right.
So it's like there's like a black box for you as the buyer, and you have to take a leap of faith to
Right.
trust the seller.
So interesting, yeah, because that is definitely applies to hair, right? Every woman, everyone who loves their hairstylist, barber, whatever, will completely get this analogy. So you also gave an analogy about the Indian jewelry market that is parallel to this, where trust became the entire business model. So could you first elaborate on that particular example and then translate it to our industry?
Yeah, so this is an example, a story that I heard from a wealthy Indian investor on a podcast. I have this sort of geek interest in economics and investing podcast, and he talks about a famous Indian investor who's like the Warren Buffett of India.
Okay.
And this guy made most of his fortune by investing in one company, a company that is called Titan. And what this company did is it was an Indian company that was created with the goal of disrupting the Indian branded jewelry market. So basically, before this company came around, that industry was a mom and pop industry. By mom and pop, I mean you would just go to a corner jeweler. There were no household names, no brands. And one of the reasons for this is that it was hard to trust your jeweler because you wouldn't know as the buyer if the gold was pure or not. So you had to put your faith in something, and that something was your uncle's friend, or relationally, you had faith that this person would sell you something that was actual gold. You wouldn't go to, there were no big brands.
Wow.
And so what this company Titan did is they installed purity meters in their stores. So you would have an instrument that would measure the actual purity of the gold in front of you.
Oh, wow.
And they also were associated with a family in India, which is highly trusted, like a family dynasty, like the Kennedys in the United States. And so those two factors together, among other things, made that this company was able to completely dominate the industry, which went from a mom and pop, low trust, highly fragmented industry into an industry where there are household names. So the industry became more mature, more sophisticated, because there was more trust. And that's the opportunity for all of us in translation.
I see where
There's
you're going.
low trust, there's low brand recognition, and we have the opportunity as linguists to elevate that trust and to bring the industry and our businesses to another level.
I see that. Very interesting segue here. I'll be getting into this initiative that you are working on now. I think it's launching this month, May of 2026. It's called LSP COP, which actually we'll get into that a bit later. But following up on the branding and how AI is working in, and literally translations becoming cheaper, even free, technology maybe commoditized. In that scenario, what exactly becomes scarce? Is there something, what's the true scarce asset in the next version of the industry?
This, in my opinion, the scarce asset is human talent. For me,
Okay.
it's the expertise. To me, we are the last generation of linguists. We are a dying breed, but we are also going to be more needed than ever.
I hear that. Yeah.
Who wants to become a translator in 2026? Who's going to learn to become a translator? How are they going to learn to become a translator with AI? AI is already decent.
Yes.
And so to me, translators are a dying breed, but not because they're less needed, but because nobody wants to become a translator. It's harder and harder to get into the profession. So to me, we're going to be more and more valuable as time goes on. The condition for that is that we have a high level of expertise, which is linguistic and extra linguistic.
Right.
Basically, that we're able to provide valuable outcomes.
Right.
And those outcomes are, the valuable outcomes are where there's risk. So basically, the name of the game is risk. If you know how to translate better than most people, way better than AI, in an area where there's risk, you're going to be in business and you're going to be more and more valuable as time goes on. So to me, what the scarcity is the high level of human expertise.
Interesting, really. And it's making me think of a couple things. One being that almost every engineer right now that gets hired in the Silicon Valley in a high level position for, say, a fast moving startup, they don't need to just be programmers and engineers. They need to be the best programmers and engineers who know how to work with the AI to help their processes to speed things up, but also who know how to correct AI, who know not to launch things that are just fresh off of your prompt. They know how to test and retest and basically do internal runs to make sure there's no glitches, there's no bugs. It's a very competitive area for everyone, I think, in so many different industries, but it's exactly what you're saying. We really do have to be excellent. And I also appreciate that you have said, even though it's a little painful to admit it, we don't want to admit this, but I definitely appreciate the comment that you feel like this is really the last generation of linguists, because I find myself conflicted when I see university programs, when I see even courses on becoming this or get certified. I always like to think, would I recommend this to one of my children? Would I recommend this career path to my children? Would I say, go ahead and do this? And a lot of times I'm looking at things where I'm like, no way, because there's no real potential long-term gain there. So you want to help them to reroute. So yeah, that's a tough, but I feel accurate comment. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who will disagree with that. We're open to all that, bring it on. But I feel like just looking at how we're making money, how things are scaling, it's pretty accurate. So I do want to, now going back, so you're essentially saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that our industry is fragmented or has been because trust doesn't scale, or at least we haven't figured out how to scale it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That relationships replace infrastructure to some extent. Is this
Yeah,
correct?
like trust, there's trust at many different levels. You
Yeah.
have trust in your neighbor, you can have trust in someone from your outer network, and then you can have trust in a brand, some fictional entity. And in translation, we haven't graduated from the relational level.
So if I can ask you directly, do you actually believe that the language industry can consolidate around trusted brands like finance has, healthcare? Is this your opinion, or is fragmentation probably just gonna stay till the end, till we're done?
I think fragmentation will always remain. I don't think you'll have a Costco of translation.
Okay, why not? Let's make it happen though. Maybe.
I think because translation is very specific. It's basically like a
Yeah.
function of the company. It's like marketing for the company. So it's very sector specific. Where I think
Right.
the opportunity is to create more household names in different industries. And
Right.
there's an infinity of markets where there's that opportunity.
Yeah.
Markets that aren't mature, markets where the buyer, when looking for translation, asks their friend or who's a translator and who might Google it or isn't really well served by the translation market. So there's opportunity everywhere to be able to create trust in a specific industry and to become a household name for that specific niche.
Industry interesting. And I remember way back, and I'm really aging myself here, but when I first started right out of college in this, just scoping around the industry, and basically a lot of us fall into it, there was one brand I think at that time called Berlitz. And Berlitz was the global language provider. And when you needed something translated, no matter where you were in the country, Berlitz, I had friends from one coast to the other who had this or that weird thing. They might have had some production translated. I had a colleague who was a songwriter and had songs and it was always Berlitz. But then it seemed very quickly, when the internet grew, everything just split off in 100 directions. So it's interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but give Berlitz a little credit. I remember at the beginning
Berlitz.
getting
I remember
some
taking Berlitz language courses.
Really?
What's interesting about that is execution is very difficult in translation. Execution is extremely difficult.
Yes.
To give you an example from our company, one of our specialties is legal translation. We have a document translated by a jurist, an actual lawyer, who's also a translator. We have it revised by someone who has a university degree. So translated, revised, client gets it. This was horrible. So it's very difficult to execute.
Yes.
It's very difficult to execute. So even within a very narrow niche, like legal translation, English into French for the Canadian market, very specialized, it's hard to execute. So imagine that all the languages, all the markets is like, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So that's like the barrier to scalability, is the ability to execute.
And moving to what I know you've described as 4 levers of competitive advantage. So this is, I think, extremely actionable. It's not discussed enough, but most people talk about these things vaguely, but you have been treating these like strategic levers, and I'll enunciate what they are, and then you can explain them to us. So these 4 levers are quality, capacity, complexity, and proximity. So let's make this real, Matt. So first, explain what each one of these is, and then explain what happens to each one in an AI first world.
Interesting. So this is like my model of the world, how I see an LSP or a linguist having a competitive advantage. Because if someone works with you, it's because you have some little thing more than the other people. So the competitive advantage that you can have as a linguist or an LSP is one of these 4 things, or a combination of them. So first is quality. It's quite obvious. So if quality is your source of competitive advantage, if quality is your thing, you do something better than other people. You have this unique expertise. For example, you're like the neurosurgeon of translation. You have this
Right.
really
Okay.
like high level of subject matter expertise. That's quality. Capacity is you're the person who always says yes. So the client has whatever the client has, you're doing it. Like you're on it, you're working late in the evening, you're the person who always says yes, who always delivers. Whatever the client throws at you, you do it. Capacity. A lot of clients are looking for capacity. For a lot of clients, capacity is a risk. They want to make sure that they never have a point of failure. They never get to a place where we're not going to get this translated in time. So that's capacity. Complexity is all the messy part of localization. So all the technical aspects, so software requirements,
Yeah.
like complicated platforms,
Yeah.
like special market particularities, all the really the cultural adaptation,
Yeah.
all the complexity from a client's perspective, all the complexity of localization or translation. And the next one is proximity. Proximity basically is you have entered the field of awareness of your client somehow. So if you have an uninformed buyer in a place where nobody translates anything and they know that client knows one translator in the right language combination, your source of competitive advantage is proximity. Another example is if you are specialized in a niche and everyone in that niche knows you. So you go to the conferences, and when people think, okay, say financial translation, French and English, oh, it's this person. This is the person. You're the go-to person for that specific market and language combination. So an LSP has usually a combination of those different factors. Like for us, for example, it's quality. So quality has always been our thing, but mixed with a certain level of capacity. So we have more capacity than expert freelancers, for example.
Yes.
So by combining those two things, we have a competitive advantage over a lot of our peers, and that's why we're in business, because we have that unique combination.
And so can you explain, like we were saying, what happens to each of these in an AI first world? We went through at least one or two of them. If maybe it's not possible to translate all these to that. How does one or two of these change in an AI first world?
That's a great question. So quality, for example, if you're in an area where quality is extremely important, you are the least affected by AI. So if you're a translator and you want to do quality work, this is where you need to retreat to. This is what you need to double down on. And a lot of translators are making that transition. So they're going from like more of a generalist translator to a highly skilled expert translator in a specific field. Or they're combining linguistic expertise with more extra linguistic expertise to be able to provide a unique result for a unique outcome for, or be uniquely able to provide an outcome for a specific set of companies. So quality is one where whatever happens with AI, if you're able to distinguish yourself in that area, it's a way to AI proof yourself.
Okay.
In terms of complexity, AI has created a lot of
I
complexity.
agree in many ways.
So one of the ways that we can now add value to our clients is by managing that complexity. So by becoming orchestrators, technological orchestrators. And that's what a lot of the larger LSPs are doing,
Right.
investing heavily in AI and platforms, and that's what they're helping their clients with. So the actual translation is no longer really their added value or the focus of their added value. The real added value that like a large LSP that's investing heavily in AI is doing is it's managing the AI, basically. That's its added value. So those are two ways I would say that AI is affecting the sources of competitive advantage for an LSP.
Now, if you had to bet, and I guess the answer, I'm just already imagining the answer based on this fragmented segment we already went through, how fragmented the industry is. But if you had to bet which of the four becomes the dominant advantage, and let's say to an LSP, which later calls LSIs now, if you had to bet which one is going to become the dominant advantage in the next couple of years, I hate to say more than two.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a crystal ball, but one thing I do see trending in the industry, like what industry experts speak about, is they speak a lot about client intimacy. Robert Martin, who works for Magic Beans Agency, who I don't know personally, but writes a lot about business development. And I find his insights very interesting. And so he talks about client intimacy. So to me, that's the same thing as proximity. It's becoming embedded with your client's operations. It's being almost able to work in the office next to them because you know their stuff so well. So it's really like partnering, getting integrated, embedded with the client, doing more than just translation, trying to find all kinds of different ways, novel ways that you can alleviate client pain points. So I think that's really the key for us as linguists. We need to get closer to our clients. We need to get really enmeshed with them to become indispensable. We need our clients to think of us like, oh, we could never manage without this company, rather than we can go to Costco or Amazon, whatever place to get our translation. If you want to survive in the era of AI, you need to become extremely relevant for the client, and you need to know them extremely well. You need to be indispensable for them. So proximity is I think it's extremely important. It's highly underrated. As linguists, we think I just need to deliver quality. How do we train as linguists? We learn how to provide quality. And we think we over-index on linguistic quality. And proximity is an equally valuable source of competitive advantage for an LSP. If you have proximity with a client, if you're enmeshed with their operations, if you know their stuff like they know their stuff, AI or no AI, they're going to need you.
I hear that. And you just made me think of a secondary issue is now with translation as a feature, as it's called, TAF, where translation is embedded into things like your email or Facebook, or in generally speaking, in areas that wouldn't have been translated before, right? We can translate quick things and WhatsApp messages. How does that proximity, how do we convince a client of the value and importance of our participation via the proximity you mentioned when those options exist?
Yeah.
And I can tell you my feelings after I hear yours.
So I don't think linguists should be trying to convince their clients, or they shouldn't be trying hard. They shouldn't be investing a lot of effort. What linguists should actually be doing is looking for risk. They should be looking for risk, and they should be looking for informed, aware buyers.
Yes.
A
Yes.
client who knows that something is risky will intrinsically know they have to give it to someone who knows their
Okay.
stuff. They're not thinking, I'm just going to put this in Copilot.
Yes.
So that education work is done for them. And so
Excellent.
we have to do that a little bit, like in certain situations where someone comes to us for a translation and maybe they're telling us, just put this through AI and revise it, or we need to educate certain clients who we're in contact with. But what we should really be doing, because there's a lot of work out there, there's a lot of needs out there, it's steering ourselves, putting ourselves in positions where the buyer's already convinced. They already know because there is risk.
And I will affirm that completely. I was just in a meeting this week with a company trying to restructure basically marketing campaigns around this. And the whole bottom line was that the refocus had to be on where are those clients who understand that they shouldn't risk anything. And in fact, that translation might be not even just unnecessary. It's more dangerous sometimes to translate things with risk than to not translate them at all, right? So say you're trying to translate some marketing campaign into 10 languages, and a client who's uninformed thinks they can just use readily available tools. They're better off translating nothing. They're better off just keeping that campaign in English and killing it, because doing it wrong in 10 different languages could completely delete the whole message they're trying to get. It could ruin the brand. And so what ultimately came to the forefront in this particular meeting was like, the whole messaging has to be around risk. And so what you've just said is really confirming and affirming to that. I mentioned it was watching something again. I think there was either something you wrote about the mid-market, the death of the mid-market. And I think you said something really blunt, that the mid-market is just getting wiped out. I think everyone is seeing this,
Yeah.
It's not like big surprise. So let's not soften it or anything. And why do you think the mid market is basically doomed?
Yeah, basically, the mid-market, just to clarify, is like basically the buyer who needs translation, but the quality requirements aren't through the roof. It just basically I need to have something. It needs to be reasonably decent. So the government of Canada is my example of a mid-market client. So the government of Canada used to be a lot of LSPs bread and butter. It's a huge client, as you can imagine. And now, because of AI, basically it's not a viable client for anyone anymore, other than maybe large LSPs who are just doing light post editing. So it's like basically it's like a, I don't want to say this pejoratively, but it's like a junk client for us translation providers. It used to be a good client, it's your bread and butter, but now it's no longer viable. It's not fun work either.
Yeah.
It's not engaging work. It's not stimulating. So those kinds of clients are no longer interesting. And most translators, I think, had clients like that. So in the middle. And that market is collapsing. So the majority is going into the bulk market or the low end market, which is basically light raw AI or light post editing, just quality control, basically.
Mhm.
Talking from my perspective in the Canadian market, which is a little bit isolated from the rest of the world because it's very English French and very high quality requirements. And so, yeah, so part of the mid market is drifting into the low end market, but also part of it is going more into the premium market. So the clients that used to be reasonably well served by, for example, by the larger firms are now finding, we get a lot of our clients like this, they're finding that what the large firms are providing is more sloppy. It's more just corrected AI, because once you go down that route as an LSP of providing lightly post-edited, then your linguists train as light post-editors. And so
Yes.
you feel
Yes.
the
Completely.
AI-ness of the
Absolutely.
text. And so you're getting a subset of clients or of the market, at least from what I imagine or think or observe, a subset of those clients is not satisfied with the sort of mid-end or the mid-range provider and going more into the boutique, more high-end provider. So that's and I hear a lot of people, a lot of industry experts framing it that way, like a polarization of the market. What used to be like one sort of continuous spectrum is now more extreme in one end, the low end, and more extreme in the high end. And to survive in the high end, you need to deliver. You need to be notably better than the low end.
So let's go in a little bit more here on the whole AI conversation. Like to pick your brain a little on how you actually see it, and maybe not just now, but in the next couple of years. Whether we've heard for the last couple of years, AI is a tool, which it is, right? We have to learn how to use it. I remember making this analogy two or 3 years ago. A fire is a tool, and it could be a wonderful thing, or it can totally destroy something. But I don't think AI is a tool, is just a tool. I don't think that's true anymore, right? More and more, it's infrastructure. And since it is infrastructure, it does have glitches, does have hiccups. Let's not oversell this at all, because in an actual production environment, an actual localization environment, AI infrastructure there's so much that still has to be fine-tuned, worked out. People have to learn how to use it, yada, yada, a million things. But what AI as an infrastructure, what does that mean for companies that may be in the process of trying to differentiate with it? Instead of it just being a tool, like there are more that I'm reading, hearing, studying, that are making infrastructure changes. And it's very common now in a lot of industries, again, especially San Francisco, especially these higher tech places. It's almost a common conversation. It's not even like the future. AI as an infrastructure is here for a lot of companies already. So what does that mean, do you think, for companies who are trying to differentiate with it?
In what sense, trying to differentiate with it?
Trying to differentiate their position as a language provider.
Okay. I'm in the boutique, the boutique high quality space. We use AI, obviously. We use it. I don't think I'm the best person to answer this question.
Okay.
The companies that invest a lot in AI infrastructure, the tools, That's a world that I'm glancing at, but I don't know if
Okay,
I'd have the expertise to answer.
let me see. Fair enough. And I know that's speaking for a lot of us, but in the boutique space,
Yeah.
do you foresee a time, or like you said, you're glancing at it? What
Yeah.
are you curious or thinking about, or have you imagined or envisioned how this on an infrastructure sort of increasingly infrastructural way, how it could support what you do?
I think from what I see, like what you can do with AI agents, I think we're going to be needed for a smaller and smaller proportion of volume. I was just speaking with a colleague who works at a financial institution. So in the sector of the financial institution where quality needs to be just like
Yes.
impeccable. So a really high risk, high quality area. And she was saying like, I've seen like what I can do with Copilot, and I could see what's happening with the agents that people are building. And maybe we're heading towards a world where people are building their agents, the translator agents, that they're becoming very, very good at translating a lot of content. And so in that transition, we could be losing more and more of the content that we're currently translating. And so that's a source of concern for everybody.
Absolutely. And so, yeah,
Um,
what I'm hearing, go ahead. Let me let you finish.
but the proportion, the relative proportion of stuff that AI is good enough at, I think will keep on increasing like exponentially. But the absolute volume of work that is going to require our intervention is also going to keep growing with a decreasing amount of people, a decreasing workforce, a decreasing amount of talent to
Right.
handle it.
And it takes me back to your initial comments about the whole risk management and risk handling itself as an asset
Yeah.
to any language company.
Yeah.
I just would assume, and I know just from implementations I've seen, the it's not even just risk, it's sloppiness. And again, the factor of training people to absolutely reap the benefits of infrastructure changes like this is it's a while before something like that happens. So I'm wondering if some of that is just a smart level of caution on your part, knowing that whole risk component, which you're guaranteeing, and the quality
Yeah.
will suddenly be on the line once you implement more on at least infrastructure wise.
Yeah. So we need to retreat towards risk, like really big time. We need to double
Yes.
down on risk. And we also need to double down on being able to do something that AI will never be able to do. AI will never be able to, or at least in the foreseeable future, hold a client by the hand, give him peace of mind, managing risk for them. That whole part of the value creation chain, that's our domain. And that moves, and what you do in that area shifts. You translated from scratch and you delivered the final product. You did the whole thing yourself. That was our job. And now it's shifting.
Yeah.
And it's shifting differently at different paces for different clients in different markets and different domains. And in some domains, it's just basically orchestration upstream or quality control downstream. In some domains, it's still translating from scratch. So like the really technical, sophisticated stuff or transcreation or marketing, where AI is just used for leverage by translators. So where we create value is constantly shifting on that spectrum. And we need to position ourselves where we are creating value, like where we are able to mitigate risk, create peace of mind, build trust, be enmeshed with the operations with our clients, whether that's providing quality or maybe that's having more of a technological approach, like we're orchestrating, we're taking care of the complexity for them, we're managing the AI for them, we're quality controlling the AI. We need to be really agile.
Yes.
And there's no recipe, there's no universal formula because the translation market is extremely diverse.
As we heard.
And so the situation is different for everybody.
So that brings us to this endeavor, your LSP cop. So let's shift now to that, which is so interesting to me. When I heard about it, I was like, wow, I have a lot of colleagues who were pretty blown away by it. So this is where all the theory we've talked about today becomes action. So this is the page that I've read through, which is an intro to it, lspcop.com. You're calling it a community for language entrepreneurs, right? And I think it's more than that, though. Let me ask you, what problems are you trying to solve with this initiative? Which I said I think it goes live this month, but what would be some of the first problems and how that?
So I'll explain with this analogy. So if you were an elite athlete and say going to the Olympics, you would be number one training with the best in the world. No Olympic athlete is training on their own in their basement. You're surrounded by the best because the sport is too sophisticated for anyone to just wing it. You need to not only be training hard, but you need to be training smart, and you need to be building on years and years of like generations and generations of collective wisdom, how the best train in each generation. And then in your generation, the absolute best, you're taking tips from them, you're learning from them, you're exchanging with them, you're brainstorming with them. They're like a sounding board for you. So all the best athletes in the world train this way. And they not only train with the best peers, but they have the best coaches. So they have access to the cutting edge science, the best technology, the best tools. So they have peers, high level peers, and they have high level coaches. As an entrepreneur, as a language entrepreneur, you have none of this. As a language entrepreneur, what do you do when you get into business is you put up a shingle, you say, I'm open for business, you print out some business cards, and then I'm going for it.
Yeah.
And there's no manual, there's no community, there's no peer group. And especially in an area that is very niche, like boutique agencies. So this is not for the freelancer. This is for like a freelancer plus. So this is starting level.
Okay.
So you're not just doing the work yourself. You might be doing some of the work yourself and all the way up to 5 million in sales. But before going into that, so basically the idea of this project is to offer the infrastructure to a boutique agency owner, a linguist who's like an entrepreneur who has a small agency, to offer that person the infrastructure that an elite athlete would have. So it's a group of peers and it's by application only. So it's what I consider the best in the world.
Fantastic. Okay.
People that you either see on LinkedIn or who are invisible but are killing it, who are doing something that is really working, who are at the cutting edge, at the forefront in this new AI world, and basically putting all those people together in a room to exchange best practices and also to bring in the best coaches, industry experts for all the specific areas of expertise that we need to bring our businesses to the next level.
So it's about knowledge sharing. So there's going to be knowledge sharing among experts. Is this have anything to do with maybe standards setting or no? And are you trying to build like an institution for the language industry, would you say, or it's just kind of a market position? Where would be all the?
It's all about knowledge sharing, also a bit of accountability. So when you're in a room with 10 or 15 other people who are killing it, you raise your game like right away. I've been in different entrepreneur groups and I've built communities of practice in my own little industry in Canada.
Right.
And you just basically rise to the occasion. You rise to your peer group, basically. So there's knowledge sharing, there's accountability, there's intel. So intel in the sense that the industry is now moving so fast that it's no longer possible to spend years iterating on your own. Like when I got started in 2006, I could just for 10 years do the same thing, try different things. It took me 7 project managers before I hired the right one. Like hired, fired, 7 times because I was just running my own thing without anyone's help.
I get that.
This is the classic gung-ho entrepreneur stereotype who just does it all on its own. And that's a waste of time, number one. It's not a smart way to work. So it's not a smart way to work. So I've become wiser. But the market is now moving so fast that you can't you can't iterate. You don't have time to iterate as much. You have to get it right faster. You have to evolve faster. So by having a group of 10, 15 people with you, they are all iterating on their own, and you can see what is working at a much faster pace when you're learning from this big group of people rather than yourself.
And it seems like it's going to do two things that you, at least two, that you already talked about, is that it's in a sense like the community is itself the signal of that trust that you said is so critical. And also it seems like it would create some sort of a shared standard, a high standard that would reduce this fragmentation that you talked about. So no wonder you put it together, because here you found the problems and you found a solution. And if I can ask though, you said the ideal candidates would be like a translator or LSP plus. Do you have any plans yet for how it will reach buyers? Or is that not the purpose of it?
That's currently not the purpose. Eventually, it could eventually become a signal, like a sort of like
Right.
a certification would be, I'm
Correct.
part of this network.
Yeah.
But it's really more of a behind the scenes thing,
Yep.
at least for now. It's like an entrepreneurs group. The business doesn't show on its shingle, I'm part of
Yeah.
this entrepreneur group. It's more of a behind the
I
scenes
get it.
things. But the people who are eligible, it's from the freelancer who works with a network of freelancers who manages the project themselves. So from maybe a couple 100,000 in revenue a year up to 1 million for the first category, which I
Right.
call bureau, which
Right.
that's from Slater. That's their category. So up to $1 million US in revenue a year. And usually in that size, you're generally managing the projects yourself. So that group has a lot in common with other people in that situation. And then above the 1 million a year mark, it's another stream, which is what I call boutique, also from Slater. So 1 to 5 million in revenue. And at that stage, you're no longer managing the projects yourself, you're
Mhm.
managing other project managers. So you have more in common with the other LSPs of that side. There's like a balance, a shifting point, a tipping point at the 1 million mark, but it's approximate.
I could also see it becoming, I'm sure it's going to evolve in ways that you don't even imagine, but working with high level peers that you trust and know are doing things the right way can become a great networking opportunity. If you have projects you can't handle, that you suddenly know that, hey, I worked with this guy in this thing, and yeah, he can probably, you can still serve the customer by having this group. So,
Yeah.
so I think I'm really proud of this, very inspired by it. I'm really grateful to see that there's these sorts of efforts that really do need to happen, as much as we know the promise and the benefit of all of the technology that's hitting us, all the new platforms, the way AI is incorporated into it and everything. I don't think people talk enough about the granular level when we are working on projects. There's still so much not worked out when it comes to how processes are changing and how we're trying to adapt to what's being sold to us as a miraculous new world. So I think it's important to note like you did, that there is a lot of business out there. It's just a matter of accommodating things the most beneficial way, right? The way that will give us the greatest profits. And yet the quality aspect of it is the reason why people will come to us if we're looking for certain sorts of clients. So Matt, I really want to thank you for your time. This was sharp. This was grounded and honest, and I think it was just so needed. I said at the beginning, you're not just reacting to change, you are trying to reshape the playing field. And that's exactly the kind of thinking that we need in the industry, and a lot of industries need this right now. So I do want to let everyone know again, the initiative that we talked about at the end is called, it's lspcop.com. And Matt, I know you're available on LinkedIn if people want to contact you. Just really want to thank you for your time and for your insights today. And thank you so much for being on Voices of the Industry for the AI Lock Think Tank.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Bridget. It was a pleasure.
Take care.